Who retired from the race? Who retired from F1? Which team is owned by who? And did Perez save his seats? Welcome to Tinfoil Helmets.
Seats. He has multiple.
Seats. Yeah. Welcome to Tinfoil Helmets, your occasional spicy hot take roundup of the latest F1 rumours, all with the most believable conspiracy theories to back them up. Everything here is carefully researched for hours to make sure it is totally founded in logic, reason, and truth. Or not. Who knows? Shall we start with, have we got anything right, Andrew?
Absolutely. That's usually where we start off. First thing we said was more Felipe Massa comments about 2008. I didn't actually see any from him.
No, he was present on the track. Well, maybe not on the track because he's retired. But he was not. He didn't seem to say anything, and they didn't let him do the interviews either. So I think we're gonna have to give ourselves a big fat 0 for this one.
Since we are a conspiracy theory led podcast, we could say they did not let him do the interviews because they didn't want to ask questions. They didn't want questions to be asked.
I didn't think that needed to be said. That was clearly obvious to
all
all
right.
the people who.
Sure, we can get the 0.
Yeah, okay. George wins was the other prediction. And then that was clearly wrong. And you said...
I said, do you mean out on the first lap? Which is also wrong, but he did not finish the race.
He did not finish the race. So we're going to give ourselves a big fat 0 on that. Maybe a 0.25. Let's be kind. 0.25.
I would like to upgrade that to a 0.33 purely because the safety car entered the pits the first time around. So he immediately on lap 1 left the racetrack and entered the pits. And did not finish the race.
I will concede that point, and I will subscribe to your newsletter.
Sweet. A third of a point. And I think it's time we move on to a brand new segment for the first time in the history of our show. Listener takes from Mexico.
We have listener takes? What is this? Are we a real podcast?
Even more surprising, we have listeners.
Shocking.
Right. One of them was that we should just fully commit to saying Logan is better than George after our points in a Williams comment. What do you think? Should we commit to that?
I will commit to that.
I mean, Logan finished the race today. George didn't.
Nor did Albon.
They both have Mercedes-powered cars. And
indeed,
Logan finished.
Yep, I would agree with that. Let's call this Logan Sargent is better than George Russell. But he just needs to be given the right car.
I mean, doesn't everybody?
True.
And then everybody was giving Hamilton way too much credit because he was still losing half a second to Max every lap.
I will not subscribe to this.
That's just, I think... 2023 in a nutshell. Like, I think we've broached the subject a couple times on this podcast of, is Red Bull actually the best car, or do they just have Max Verstappen, who is clearly the best driver at this point in time in that car?
I think they've got both. Maybe not the best car, but they've got a very, very good car with a very, very good driver.
Because if you just remove Max, like, I guess not after today, but because the Mercs were just... But, you know, it's still... The title would be up for grabs still with one race remaining, I believe.
It would be close, but it would be looking like Perez was going to get his world championship. So,
right, but that's because Max does not exist in that universe.
Indeed.
And then finally, besides Checo, Yuki had the biggest "oh no, my career" moment of that weekend, given that he was on a great drive from the pit lane, and he threw away at least in 8th place because he was getting impatient.
I will agree with that. I think that's fair.
That's also not a good look when you could honestly say there are probably 3 Red Bull driver seats up for grab at this point in time.
3?
Checo, Yuki, or the 2 Alpha seats and the extra seat that's not Max's.
Are we saying that Daniel Ricciardo is loose in his seat?
I think if Daniel wasn't so beloved, he would not be where he is. I see
it.
And the fact that we have, like, essentially Max is the only one who purely has a safe seat.
Yes, I will concede that point. I will concede that point.
Right. Because you're also telling me, like, if somehow they couldn't pry Oscar or Orlando away from McLaren, they wouldn't put one of them in one of those seats, and Liam's not looking terrible. And
No,
yeah.
I agree with that. I'll go with that.
And then we can move on to some between race drama, or Monday. Holy crap.
All the rumors, all unfounded in every possible way, with all the possible stirring of the proverbial poop that you could imagine.
So I was going to say, should we do this as a speed round? But then the race was a bit boring. So do we want to not do this as a speed round, or do we want to speed round it?
I think that maybe it behooves us to try and wrap this up into one narrative. Because I think it is possible to do that, and I think it's possible to do that expeditiously.
All right, well, let's go through everything, and then I want to hear your one narrative.
Great. Go for it.
So, there were 250 million shares of Aston Martin that changed hands. I think the theory is that it's the Armco shares.
That is the current leading theory, apparently, then? It's not Lawrence's?
It's not Lawrence's. Not, well, at least not all of Lawrence's. It was about a 15% stake, if I remember correctly.
And so who is Aramco selling them to?
Whoever bought them for $250 million.
I see. So we don't have any data on that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Next one.
We got Fernando out at Aston Martin to retire. We have Fernando Alonso to Red Bull, which Helmut Marko thinks he is making up. And we have Fernando Alonso staying at Aston Martin.
Okay. Keep going.
And then we had somebody from the Mexican Grand Prix who you found said they heard a rumor that they don't want to believe in the paddock, which would be Checo retiring, Daniel to Red Bull, Liam to Alpha.
I think the actual rumor that was being referred to was the rumor that Nando was retiring. In hindsight, given that the person in question here is from Spain, follows the Spanish drivers a lot, he does a lot of F1 TV, and I think there's a close association there because he tweets in Spanish mostly.
Gotcha. Toyota's buying Sauber.
Yep, that's interesting.
Mike Elliott, Mercedes CTO, leaves the team.
Supposedly pushed by Lewis.
Ooh. Sainz leaving Ferrari.
To Audi, I assume.
Albon to Ferrari.
Which is, I had not heard that one until right now, and that is bonkers.
I like that one. I think that's all the between race drama that I think you could wrap up into one narrative.
Okay. Yes, let's try this. So, what's going on is Lawrence Stroll is hurting for money, so he sold $250 million of Aston shares to Toto Wolff, because Toto Wolff still wants to participate in F1. This has caused the fact that Toto never wants to deal with Nando. Nando has had his seat reneged, and he is going to leave Aston Martin because he's actually going to Red Bull, little do we all know, because Checo's been kicked out because he can't drive a car to save his life. And Nando is going to fight Max and cause the worst season for Red Bull that has ever been invented, because those two will just go at it hammer and tongs. At the same time, because Toto is trying to get out of F1, he has convinced Toyota that they should buy Sauber, because Audi want to sell Sauber because they've realized that Sauber can't make a car. And this conveniently helps Toto, because Toto's managing this all behind the scenes because he wants to sell Mercedes to Audi to keep it within the German family. This thing causes a whole cascade of those driver movements, because yet again, Fernando Alonso is the chaos machine in the middle of all of it. Because if you take out Fernando from Aston Martin, who's going to go to Aston Martin to replace him? And that leaves open a whole set of questions that comes up, which I would like to refer our listeners to, especially our dedicated listeners to the story about the beer sponsorship leaving Ferrari and moving to Aston Martin, which means the only conclusion is that Carlos Sainz is stopping off at Aston Martin on his way to Audi in 2026, because Aston Martin, who has a Mercedes engine, is actually going to move to Honda, because Mercedes is going to be the engine that's in the Audi, and therefore we've all wrapped up into a nice little thing. And of course that allows Albon to go to Ferrari, because there's now a seat open there.
Well, okay, then you heard it here first.
Yep, it's there. It's wrapped up and perfect.
If it is that silly, this will be the silliest of all silly seasons.
It is
for all these chess pieces to work.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Is there some sort of prop bet you can place on like any one of these sports gambling websites?
I'm pretty sure there is. Like, you can bet on anything. It's totally legitimate. But to be more serious, the thing that I thought that was most interesting in the week was the 250 million shares kind of disappeared, and I think the post got deleted. I think someone may have faked it, which would ruin my whole plan.
I do like the idea of you going to like FanDuel or something and be like, I've got the biggest, I got the biggest parlay bet ever for Formula One.
And it'd be worth it, because you put $1 on that and they'll give you 25 million to 1 odds. And I'm like, great, problem solved. If this works, it works.
I like the idea of Toyota coming back into Formula One, because as I messaged you, if there is one automotive organization that is more will they won't they with Formula One than Toyota, it's Honda. Or no, than Honda, it's Toyota.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
There's something about like the Japanese in Formula One where they want to be part of it, but then they realize they don't really want to be part of it, and it's just this like hilarious of when they're in they want to be out, when they're out they want to be in. It's the best.
It's the greatest paradox of F1, because nobody realizes how expensive it is, but they all want to be part of it until they realize how expensive it is. But then they forget how expensive it was when they leave, and we just keep going in circles. Cough Ford, cough General Motors.
Let's move on with some more between race drama. Oscar Piastri is a murderer.
Indeed, this was a shock outcome. Shock outcome.
Oh yeah, Oscar Pistorius.
Oh, different Oscar, similar accents.
That was a great moment in F1 Twitter on Monday, where somebody tweeted out that they can't believe, or they don't support Formula One because they let a murderer drive a Formula One car, and then they realized they had the wrong Oscar.
The reality is the number of murders that happen in F1, like Alonso murdering Perez today. Boom. Anyway, yes, that was quite a shock, and the answer here is, remember, check your sources and check your facts.
Check your spelling. And then Checo had a great comment of maybe Max will help him win P2 in the championship. And Dominic, what was Max's reply?
Bro, you have the fastest car. You should be able to do this without my help.
Yeah, I don't know what more you can say of like, if we were like the third fastest car, sure. But it's like, if you can't do it without my help, maybe you shouldn't be here.
More importantly, the gap between third and second in the championship is bigger this year than it was last year, and Max was not willing to help Checo last year, so I'm not quite sure where Checo got that idea from. It should also be noted for the record that apparently these interviews basically happened at the same time. They were within minutes of each other's, where each of them clearly had not talked to each other, and it was beautiful.
Lovely. You'll love to see it. And then looking ahead to next race weekend, Las Vegas, apparently there's no place to park your private plane. There's $3,000 landing fees at the kind of 3 Vegas airports. There's still about 700 parking places short, which is interesting because apparently you can also start to get tickets for cheap, because it turns out nobody wants to buy like $3,000 tickets to see a race in Vegas.
I thought they'd said they'd sold out all the general admission tickets and they'd unleashed extra tickets where you couldn't actually see the track. That was the story earlier in the year.
I don't want to talk too much about Vegas at this point in time.
I have one more tactical question about parking private planes. One, this is clearly a problem for me, but I also don't understand why a $3,000 fee is going to stop someone who has a private jet. Like, how does that even work? Like, oh, my, $5 million private jet that I pay like $150,000 a year for a pilot to fly. Oh my God, I'm not paying the $3,000 to park it up. Oh, this is too expensive, man. This is just ridiculous. Like, really? I don't understand how that works. It should have been $30,000.
You're spending that on gas to get to the flight, the race anyway.
Exactly. It's strange. I mean, talk about supply and demand and economics. It doesn't work like that. So.
Yeah, but I would say I think it is interesting that Vegas, which generally deals with high rollers, who I assume on like big gambling-y weekends, like they get a big influx of private jets and high rollers coming in. It does strike me as a bit odd that they are running out of private plane parking.
Yeah, and I don't know, what are they supposed to do if there's 700? Are they like, you're going to land, drop your passengers off and go park somewhere else in another airport?
Fun fact, you'd still pay the landing fee.
Indeed, which makes it so very confusing about what's going on. And I can't even do my normal narrative, which is somebody sees this as an opportunity to make an awful lot of money, because $3,000 is not a lot of money. I feel like 30 grand, now we're talking.
Well, you just got to land 10 of those planes and there you go.
Exactly. Shall we see if people still have jobs?
They all still have jobs.
Great. Should we go on to qualifying recap?
Yeah, I thought this time we could just talk about both qualifyings because sprint formats suck.
Yes.
And apparently the FIA is looking to change the sprint weekend format because they also realize this is terrible.
I do wonder how badly they're going to change it, because I can't believe they'll work out how to make it better.
So they were saying that we'd still do Friday free practice 1, and then sprint shootout on Friday, and then Saturday morning would be the sprint race, and then Saturday afternoon would be the qualifying for the race, and then Sunday would be the race.
Now, if they could just get rid of that Friday sprint shootout, that'd be great.
The interesting thing I think here is, like, are there 2 different Parc Fermé conditions? Because I think that would be interesting. One thing I think would be really interesting is because normally on a regular race weekend, it's Parc Fermé, like from the start of qualifying, like as soon as your car leaves the garage for Q1 or leaves the pit lane for Q1, you are in Parc Fermé conditions. I think it would be very interesting if on the sprint weekends, it's at the end of Q1, your car is locked. So if you wanted to make a setup change in the 18 minutes of Q1 after a sprint race before the Grand Prix, you could.
I think that makes sense. I do wonder whether what they should do is restrict Parc Ferme to after the sprint race, and then you've effectively re-added back the free practice behavior of being able to test your car out and work out what's going on to set it up for the race. It also allays Max's angst about the fact that whatever happens on those sprint races tells you what the race is going to be. I think you could do that rather than making it Q1, because I feel like the time to analyze is difficult. It's not just the time to change; the time to analyze could be difficult and could be a challenge.
That would actually be really interesting if you could change your whole car technically in the middle of a sprint race. Like you could see somebody doing a rear wing adjustment or something like that. That would be interesting. Anyway, let's talk about quali. So race quali had some absolutely biblical rain towards the end.
I can't believe how dark and how quickly it got dark. I for the longest time thought, well, not the longest time, but while I was watching it, I thought it was just, cameras and the TV and they don't do a good exposure shift, etc., etc., etc. But seeing the shots afterwards when they had from the fixed frame photograph cameras, man, that sounds old wordy. They was really, really dark. It was bonkers. It was nuts.
And Javi was right. Rain in 7 minutes.
The wrong 7 minutes?
No, I think it was about 7 minutes.
Was it? I thought he said that earlier in the session.
He said it right, I think, as the session was starting, and I think rain did start about 6 or 5 minutes to go about that. The interesting thing was that screwed up a lot of people on their laps is before a big storm comes in, wind comes in, and that's where so it got a lot gustier, and that's what screwed up some of the people. So it was very interesting to me that the AlphaTauris were both out in Q1 on Friday, but they were both into Q3 on Saturday in the sprint shootout. So they fixed something.
Yeah, you've got the next item here is Aston was in Q3 on Friday and they were stuck at the back on Saturday. There's definitely some on the bubble performance there. Yeah,
I think that there's a bit of an asterisk there because Fernando was taken out by an Alpine.
He was.
So he was 15th with no time for the sprint.
But what about Stroll? Where was Stroll?
That was interesting. Stroll chucked it on P3 for Friday qualifying somehow, which was hilarious. There was some great pit lane photos of when they were doing the interviews, in the safety car garage, of Max and Charles being like, "What's he doing here, man?" They couldn't believe it.
Who is this guy and why is he here?
That's not Fernando. That's Fernando's blood boy.
Okay, next item on the list.
And then Lando chucked it on pole for the sprint, but they were both into Q3 for the main race qualifying, but Lando put it on pole in the sprint, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty good, and it seems to have been justifiably there. It wasn't just a timing thing.
Yeah, he was definitely there, and I think Max definitely proved, as Max tends to this whole season, of in Q3 he was trying to get past people to get that outlap done as quickly as possible, and flying past George, and George wasn't staying to the left. George got a penalty, and yeah.
He was channeling the same energy I have when I'm trying to get on the motorway, and people are just driving like a snail. It's just just get on with this thing. Let's just go and get it done. And I have to say, I appreciate that the new regulation was you can go slow, but you have to stay left. And there is an implicit statement in that you can go drive past people. And I am here for that. Let's just get this on and get it done.
Is that a UK thing? Because in most countries, we drive right and pass left.
I don't know. It's America. I just go where there's a gap. Where the gap is. I drive like Senna says I should race, which is if there's a gap, you've just got to go for it.
Yeah. Ferraris continue to have their one lap pace.
Where were they? I've forgotten where they were. Did they qualify up front? Close?
Well, Charles was P2 on Friday.
Yeah.
And they were 4th, 5th, 6th, somewhere in there on Saturday. So they were there.
Yeah.
They were thereabouts. Mm-hmm. For a car that's kind of been crap the whole season, at least front runner crap, they're doing a good job of sticking the car up there.
Is this a byproduct of the shortness of the lap? The car can't even keep. It's got great half lap performance, and it can't quite keep it all the way through, and that's how it kind of gets to the end, and it's never quite on pole or it's close to pole.
Maybe.
So interesting.
So we need the secure circuit back again. The Bahrain outer loop.
Yes, nice 58-second lap time.
Yeah, and then the Mercs were, I think, about 5th and 6th. They were consistent.
But they've been all season, basically, except on the odd occasion.
Yeah, it was a pretty standard qualifying. I mean, you had 5 teams, each with both cars represented in Friday qualifying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The craziest thing was just that storm coming in.
Oh, yeah, that was That was quite something. Quite something. Sprint race?
Well, Lando was on pole for all of about 50 feet.
Yeah.
And then Max went off into the distance.
Managing his tires and just carefully driving around like a Saturday afternoon.
And man, there were some bad omens for the Merc of what was going to happen on Sunday.
Yeah. It does lean into what Max says. What happens on the Saturday is what you see on the Sunday. Yeah, that was pretty bad.
And when you block the cars in Parc Ferme and stuff, there's nothing you can do to be like, oh, we should try to fix this.
The entire internet said that they should have started from the pit lane, and I don't think that would have helped, to be brutally honest.
Well, they would have scored, at worst,
2 points lower.
2 less points. 2 points lower.
Maybe it was worth it. Maybe the internet knows more than the rest of us. Speaking of performance and bad performance, should we go on to the race recap?
We should. But before we can talk about the race, okay. I think we need to talk about the formation lap. True.
It was important, and it produced result-altering results today. The question is this a cover-up, or did it really happen this way?
I think it really happened this way, because I don't think Charles is that bad of a driver that he bends it at like turn 5 on the formation lap.
Is he not, though? Is that not classic, cliched, perfect Charles? Giving it a bit of lefty and a righty and swirling it and putting your foot down, and whoops, you spun off into the ditch?
No, I think it was a legit hydraulics failure thing. Because if he did do it, because he got going again.
Yes.
And then I think if he could have made it back around to the start or to the pit lane, which I think that maybe they could have got it going, but I don't think he was able to drive because the hydraulics were the power steering and everything else. And I think it was done.
But beyond that, he'd gone out of the car before he did that.
That's true too.
And since George ruined it for the rest of us by screaming so loudly when he accidentally drove into Joe and nearly killed him, the regulations have changed that if you get out of the car, you're done. You can't get out of the car. Never leave the car. So yes, so that was lap 0. Spicy, shocking, all the things.
Which, if there's ever a race for like Max to just run away with it, it is having nobody starting alongside of him at P2, and then 2 Astons that get an absolutely terrible start in 3 and 4. Like, the man is just like seriously, what is he gonna do? Just drives like. I could have led that race into like turn 4 with how bad those starts were.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. I think that to a certain extent, Max just decided that he wanted to give everybody a bit of hope, and he went off in the distance, but he just kept it in check for a moment to let people snort their hopium.
Yeah, and then who started? Was it a Haas that started the chaos?
I'm unsure whether it was a Haas or whether it was Albon. I think it was a Haas. I think it went sideways just a little bit, just as Albon was coming back onto the track a little bit, and hilarity ensued.
Well, they never investigated it or anything, so they clearly just called it a racing incident.
Yeah, I always feel like somebody should be not blame is not the right word, but like at fault. I want to know whose fault it was. I mean, it clearly was a racing incident. I don't think anybody did anything stupid, but nonetheless, yes. So that was a shocker. Do we really want to talk about laps 6 through 66? Really?
I think there's some things worth mentioning.
Okay.
Well, first off, we had a red flag, and then we got a restart.
We did.
Which
was fine.
Man, it was fine. They got away. They were good.
To precursor to the most exciting thing from lap 6 to 66, Lewis had a great start. He got off the line quickly, was making great progress. Clearly, he has fixed his starts, because for the longest time he was like, "You're like, what are you doing, man?" He has improved that, and he was good off the line, and then nothing happened for 66 laps, really. Yep,
but I think there's some stuff worth talking about in there.
Okay,
because if you are a Mercedes fan, it was definitely time to look away. If you are a fan of some Merc Schadenfreude, it was a great time to watch the race of just like, how many cars are going to overtake them? Is Logan Sargent going to get points overtaking George Russell on track? Because that was looking close.
Yeah, that was tight. Very
and then Lewis was saying that he thinks they should have gone onto a hard tire, which was like a big shock because everybody was like, don't touch the hard tire.
So many questions. I think it's important to note, I think this might have been the Mercedes' worst performance of the last 2 years. Like, they have struggled to go forward, but rarely have they just slithered down the order like they did today. They were just going backwards. It was terrible.
Yeah, there was one time going into a pit stop where Bono told Lewis, okay, get everything out of your tires. And Lewis was just, you could literally hear him laughing on the radio of, I've been pushing hard for 5 laps.
At least Lewis was maybe able to keep a chipper attitude.
Yeah, I think it's almost gallows humor in a sense of like, no, this is so bad. Like, no, I've been pushing for the last 5 laps and you couldn't tell. Man, that car just went nowhere today, and George ended up retiring. Lewis got 8th, pretty much securing Checo 2nd in the drivers.
Boo.
Yeah. Also, since we've been harping on Merc about their pit stops, and we got a chance to see 4 Mercedes pit stops today, I noticed something. Their drivers don't get away.
I have noticed this before, but I'd never thought that it was part of the pit stop times.
So they always talk about pit stop times as the time the car is stationary.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess Red Bull, if you want to rules lawyer your way to a new pit stop title, just keep the car slowly moving forward, and you can do a 0-second pit stop. Yeah. Just, put it on the jacks and get the jacks slowly rolling forward. There we go. We'll do it. 0-second pit stop.
That does feel like a tactic worth investigating.
Yeah. But I don't think it's actually worth investigating. But I think it's interesting because you've mentioned previously that they need to like retool their system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's happening is the jacks all drop, or the tires get changed, the jacks drop. And I think there's a delay for that light to go green. I think the drivers are doing a good job of watching the light, but I think this is what they need to retool, because they're almost better off if they had a lollipop man out there like raising the flag, because if you watch that Merc pit stop, it is tires, jacks, drop, go. It is at least 2 or 3 tenths that they are just sitting there before they roll off.
Do we need to do homework for the next episode where we should go back and watch a few races and see whether this is consistent or whether it was just unique to today?
I think we could just see what happens in Vegas.
Well, that's also true, but I feel like I've been doing some homework. Or maybe I'll do some homework. I'm not good at homework, though. But yes, I agree with your sentiment, and it is definitely something to watch out for.
It was at least something interesting to look at, because if you're talking about if we're talking about 2.5 as the golden thing of what we were talking about last week, they had some 2.8s and 2.9s in there, and if you're talking about staying stationary for 3 or 4 tenths, just sitting there, because it's not a short amount of time when you're watching it.
No. Yeah, I agree. They'd be in the ballpark.
Did Max Verstappen have the lowest amount of screen time of any driver today?
Yes.
I'm trying to think who I saw less than the race leader.
Logan. You didn't see Logan.
Logan?
You didn't see Danny, and you didn't see Piastri.
They got a lot of screen time during the red flag, because it was like, are they going to make it back out? Will they? Won't they?
True, but then again, if you're gonna counter that, if that's race time, then Max got the shot of coming up to the thing and the lights flashing and the lights going off, and you got to see him then. So for the first quarter of the lap. So yes, I think it was close. It was definitely close.
Saw a lot of the Mercs today, though. That's for certain.
Yeah, which was kind of surprising. I assume that's because
no. Because that's where all the action was. People overtaking the Mercedes. Just, here comes a Ferrari, here comes an Alpine, and they overtook one and they overtook the other. Like, that's where the action was. It's how many cars can overtake the Mercedes today.
Too real. Real.
Yeah. Speaking of, we didn't see a lot of Lance either. He was kind of in no man's land.
Indeed, but he managed to finish in a reasonable place.
He did. Because Aston is back. What did they do? They took all the upgrades off their cars.
Seeing this rumor, hearing Ted say this rumor, I think it was, or somebody said it on the commentary. I went and did a quick search, and it does look like it was a statement they'd actually made a while back, like a week ago. They're like, we're gonna try mixing and matching the pieces because it's not going well. They blame their simulator has not been correlating for them, and that's what sent them in the wrong direction. But you know what the most surprising part of this is? It's not just that they put the old parts back on and it worked, like it had good performance. They put the old parts on and they were as good as they were at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, that was the crazy bit. It wasn't like, oh man, they're up there again, but they're battling with everything. Like, the only car that was probably faster was the McLarens.
Yep.
But they've been up there since Silverstone.
Yep.
So it's really like, let's put the May package back on and see if this thing still works. And it's like, oh, this thing still works.
It's there's something that I think that presents them a serious challenge, because if you can't get your simulation correlations in whatever working, you're in deep doo-doo for the next year. So
Yeah, but I think they got 2 races, I think, where their priority should be to get the data to make that simulator work. I think that should be their focus for the rest of the season, because if they don't get that fixed, there's almost no point in showing up to the test next year with a new package, because you don't know what's happening.
does this mean that next year could be a 5-way fight between Red Bull, who are hampered by their restrictions on how much they can use in the wind tunnel and whatever, because they've been performing well, as well as the tail end of the penalty, plus Merck, who claim they fixed it, plus McLaren, who seem to have had, like, you know, the holy grail handed down from upon high to make the car better, and Aston Martin, who seem to still actually have a good car if they can just get the correlation right, and we assume that Ferrari will pull their proverbial out of their proverbial.
I won't go so far as to say a 5-way fight for first. I'll say a 4-way fight for second.
Thanks for giving us hope and opportunity for an exciting season next year. Oh, is that because you think that Mercedes is going to be at the front and we're going to see Lewis get his 8th championship? That's what it is, isn't it?
Sure, but in reality, I think it's Red Bull hasn't touched that car since July, and they've been working on the next car so much. I think even with the penalty, they're just so far ahead by just having it all locked up. And yeah, I mean, what they said, they stopped development sometime around Spa, I think.
Yeah, it does not bode well.
Yeah. Unless Adrian's forgotten how to design a car, which would be the first time in 30 years, 40 years.
I forgot to send you the link. He did an interview with, I think it was the Daily Telegraph. I might be wrong. Anyway, it was clearly a piece planted by Red Bull to get ready for Adrian Newey's retirement, because it was like, actually, Adrian only spends 50% of his time on the F1 car. The rest of his time he's working on, I am not making an exaggeration, a submersible and the RB17 track car, and there was something else that he was working. Apparently, he's working with MotoGP as well on motorbikes in some way, and that they've got this other guy who, I apologize for forgetting his name, who is basically running it day to day, and he's really the person driving that team. I feel like there's something interesting going on there, getting ready for retirement.
So, if you're every other F1 team, how demoralizing is that for you? Because at least you could look and say, oh, well, they have Adrian Newey and he'll retire one day. And then the plant piece comes out that says, oh, yeah, but he's not doing a lot on the F1 car these days.
I don't know. Oh, actually, just occurred to me, you have the theory about Helmut Marko and the cost cap. Maybe this is a story to try and provide backup evidence about how Adrian Newey and whatever he's getting paid doesn't really count towards the cost cap, because he only spends 50% of his time on the F1 stuff.
Or if he spends 49% of his time on the F1 stuff, then Helmut Marko is another one of those. You get a certain amount of people that don't count against the cap.
It's the top 5 or top 3 or something like that.
Yeah. And Helmut Marko then becomes one of those.
Right. Next.
So I thought Danny Rick, it's hard to tell because he and Oscar were probably a bit damaged at the back, but he was consistently pulling out a gap over that McLaren, which was probably as good as we could see.
Yep. And I think it was important for him to do the race. It was important for him to get that miles in seat after being out for the first half of the season, then out for after 3 races. I think that was probably the most important thing, even if he had done badly. But at least it means that we don't sit here going like, Danny, what did Danny do? Woof. Because he got bounced by a tyre. On the subject of tyres, actually, yet again, the tyre that's supposed to stay stuck to the wheel was not stuck to the wheel and then bounced, and took out 3 cars? That was not good. That's not good. Anyway, that's enough said on that.
So what just occurred to me in all this is, so generally it used to be that Interlagos was the only at elevation circuit because it's about 2,000 feet, a little bit more than 2,000 feet above sea level, right? And then we have Mexico, which is 7,000 feet above sea level, and fantastic. Vegas is 2,000 feet above sea level. That's also not a sea level race like everything else tends to be.
Okay. And what should we take from this?
The Alphas might not be bad there because they've been pretty good at not sea level tracks where they're not dealing with sea level drag.
Interesting theory. We should make sure we put that in the plausible predictions for Vegas.
Yeah. Did Checo save his seat? We asked at the top.
No.
You don't think so?
No. I don't think he did. I don't think he did for the specific reason he has the best car. He took a surprising amount of time to get to where he was getting for the podium. He didn't get past Lewis instantaneously. It was a bit, he had to wind that up a little bit, not as much as he did for Fernando, but he had to wind it up and make some effort to get past, and then he kind of got back the other way, and he went back the other way. And then finally, he gets stuck behind Fernando Alonso, admittedly the widest car on the track, for what, 15 laps? 10 laps? It was ridiculous. And he couldn't make it, like, I get that it's not going to be easy, I accept that, but like, really? He was, like, Fernando was, what, 25 seconds off everybody else? It's not like he was sitting there with amazing performance. I don't think he did any harm to his seat, which is unlike every of his previous races in the last, since Italy, I think it is. I just don't think he did any good for his seat.
So what you're telling me is Checo won't save his seat because he has trouble passing world champions on track?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can take it. Like, that's the only thing is everybody who had trouble passing is a former world champion.
And he's in the most amazing car.
And the person who he cannot beat is a world champion. He got past Stroll just fine. Like,
that's the thing. I feel that if you're going to be put in that car, right, you should not, especially when the car clearly is so much better than everybody else. And I agree with your point at the beginning that Max is amazing, blah, 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 etc. And he's handed down from upon high and he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But I still think that, like, again, I don't think he did harm to his seat, but, like, I just feel it should be more. Right? Like, especially when this is a person who stands around and is like, well, I could take Max. Really? Are you sure about that, Checo? Do you want to keep repeating those words, or do you need to accept the fact that you are nothing but a second driver?
We need Checo Perez 2.0, 3.0, the Valtteri Bottas method of every season comes back and, nope, this year I'm going to bring it to Lewis.
To make this super nerdy, we need the Checo Perez XP Service Pack 2. Where you fixed all the horrible problems with it, and it was stuck for the rest of eternity as the one that everybody loved. That's what we need.
I remember that as Windows 98, not XP.
No, XP was the one that got the security patch.
Oh,
with the
stuff.
You're thinking of OEMSR2.
No, I'm thinking of Windows 98 Second Edition.
Oh, yes.
Yes, because they actually had to come out with a second edition of Windows 98. Well, that's
branding.
This is, I'm sure, where our listeners want this podcast to go.
Exactly.
But yeah, those last 5 laps of Checo trying to get past Fernando, and it just looks like Fernando set it all up to still get the podium. It's like, sure, you can come past me with 1 lap or on the penultimate lap, and then I'll just come past you on the last lap.
It was amazing, and it makes me lament the fact that Fernando has made such ill-timed career choices. Because I think that
I believe he's definitely older and wiser than he once was.
He is wiser, and he may be actually older, but he is a better driver as well. And he's not lost any of his chutzpah and excitement and passion. And it's great. He needs to be in a car. I will say that the rumor at the top of the show that Fernando was going to Red Bull, I'm like, I would love that so much. It would be amazing. I think that would be a great way for him to finish out his career. Just to Fernando the timing of randomly switching teams and cutting your contract short, and he finally parlays it into the greatest car ever.
I would like to see it, but I don't think Red Bull's going to go for it because I think they'd rather have Max and Checo or Max and Daniel than Max and somebody who might take points off Max and give Max an absolute run for his money.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. You need a great second driver.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought it would be fun, given Lando Norris was on the podium for again this season, and Fernando Alonso is back on the podium, and Sergio Perez missed the podium. I thought it'd be fun to play a fun game with you of how well do you know the podium counts from this season?
Oh, go on then. What's the format here?
All right. Max Verstappen clearly has the most podiums. Do you want to take a stab at how many he has?
He's had 19 out of 20.
All right. Who is next on podiums for the season?
Lewis.
No. I'll give you a hint. There are 2 people, and they both have 8.
Fernando?
Fernando has 8. Who else has 8?
Charles. No, Norris.
Sergio Perez.
Oh, Sergio. Oh.
And then in 4th place is...
Lewis.
No. Lando Norris with 7.
Wow.
And if you think of how late that Macca came on, the fact that Lando now has 7 podiums, he's 1 behind Sergio.
It shows that they did magic to that car. That car, it didn't just like get a notch up to get you into the podiums. It went from the back to the front. It's ridiculous.
Lewis has 6, Charles has 4, Carlos has 3, Oscar has 2, Esteban, George, and Pierre have 1.
George.
And the crazy thing in all this is Max has 31.7% of all the podiums this season.
That's good work.
When you think the only one he missed is Singapore.
He didn't get a podium in Singapore?
That's the only one he missed, or he had 33% of the podiums.
Where was he in Singapore?
6th.
The car was crap.
Yeah, but that's because we speculated it can't warm its tires up on that track, which makes perfect sense.
And they were saving the plank.
Anyway, anything else you want to talk about on the race?
I don't think so. Boring.
What was not the most boring was Martin Brundle's grid walk. Did you get a chance to witness this?
We need to make sure our listeners are aware. This is Spicy Takes and Rumors. Correct.
Yes, we've moved on to just fun takes and rumors and
great.
fun things around the weekend.
Great.
Did you happen to watch the Martin's grid walk?
I do not have the grid walk from Sky.
Well, first off, Machine Gun Kelly was trying to get him to play air guitar. He suggested keyboard, and he would not play along. And Machine Gun Kelly was not a fan, but I didn't really care about that. My absolute favorite moment though was Martin spots Bernie Eccleston and says, "Oh, there's Bernie." Walks up to Bernie Eccleston and says, "Oh, Bernie, how are your tax problems?" Essentially.
How did Bernie take this?
Not well.
Did he respond or did he just walk off?
No, he responded.
Oh, credit.
They had a small conversation, but it was literally, Bernie, how are your problems with the office or whatever the British version is of the IRS? Like
Inland Revenue.
Yeah, something like that. Or yeah, it was very funny because Bernie was like, "Do we have to talk about this?"
It's quite impressive actually to give Martin. But then again, I think Martin's been around long enough. But before it became so corporate, so there's a bit more of a, they hang out down the pub, etc., etc.
Yeah, he definitely had some thoughts. He was like, what was his comments on Bernie Eccleston were along the lines of, "I'm not sure we would be where we are today with Formula One if it wasn't for him. However, he has said some ludicrous things over the years that I do not agree with."
Yes, that is a very nice and balanced way to put that.
Apart from that, I think a lot of our takes and rumors came during our between race drama section.
I would refer listeners to the beginning of the podcast, lest we rehash all of the crazy stories.
Then we still Audi sells to Toyota, I think is where we're at, because Audi's now going to buy Merc.
I do think this has more than a 0% chance of happening, which is that Audi decides it's going to sell Sauber to Toyota because Toyota knows they can get a good deal and that Audi knows that they've bought the wrong team. And then Toto, because he just looks so despondent today,
he looks so sad. He looked so sad.
As I said, it was their worst performance in 2 years. The car has never gone. It's not gone forward, but it's never gone backwards.
I think it's longer than 2 years. It's like their worst performance since 2013.
I am not counting the previous regulations in this context, right? Like, I think if you go for that far back, like the last time the Mercedes was this bad was like 1923 or whatever it is. I'm not going that far back. I'm going back in recent history since they've been, a world-class performing team. And this race was their worst performance, unquestionably. But therefore, I think Toto wants out, and he's going to sell it to Audi because that's really what Audi wanted in the first. Well, Audi wanted McLaren, but McLaren didn't want to sell. But he'll take Mercedes. So anyway. Wrap up and crazy but plausible predictions for Vegas?
Sure. I think it's going to be an utter failure of a race.
I think it's going to be an amazing race, but it will look terrible on TV because of crappy TV coverage.
I was going to say, I am sad that races are leaving our time zone. It's been a good 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's been a good 3 weeks.
And ironically, this is the race in our time zone.
It's the physically most close race to us. If we listen carefully, we might even hear it. It is so close, and yet it's the most inconvenient. It's unacceptable. It is wrong on so many levels.
It is in our time zone, and it's like, I don't know if I want to. Qualifying's at midnight. I don't think I'm going to watch that.
No.
The race is at 10. I might watch that.
The saving grace is that at least it's on a Saturday and not on a Sunday at like 10 p.m. because that would be ridiculous. So I don't dispute that it could be a failure. I'm just hoping I'm hoping the racing is good because I feel like it would be nice to have that for the last two things. We've had some good racing this year. I think that's an opportunity. Therefore, I don't want to taint it.
Yeah, and said earlier, I don't think the Alpha Towers are going to be bad because it's another somewhat at altitude race.
Yep, it's going to be interesting.
as a quick guess for Vegas, do you want to take a prediction that of something we're definitely not going to count, of how many casino related roll the dice gambling puns or comments are going to be made?
Crofty will make at least 15 throughout the weekend.
Is that a per lap basis or
No, total.
Oh,
because stuff will be happening on the track that is unexpected, and he won't have time to tee them up.
Anyway, thank you for listening to Tinfoil Helmets. We are, as always, waiting your feedback. Please write in at feedback@tinfoilhelmets.com and let us know your conspiracies, feedbacks, and also wants. And tell your friends to listen, to like, to rate, subscribe. And if you don't want to write our email address, you probably have our numbers. Just text us.
And remember to follow us on the social medias at Tinfoil Helmets.
Yeah. I did know there was a promo for the Las Vegas race after the Brazil race, and I can only assume it had a table, a card table, and it had two aces face up, and I was only assuming it was a blackjack hand. And that's not the hand you want to show in blackjack, because if it was like Texas Hold'em poker, it would be two face down cards, and why would you want to show that be aces? But it's like, but I was looking at it went by very quickly, and I'm like, did they just show two aces up in like a blackjack, like in a blackjack format of how you generally would see it on a blackjack table? And it was like, that's not the hand you want. That's 12, man. I mean, I guess you could split aces, but
here's the thing:
my blackjack's rusty. I
have no idea about any of it. And so for me, I'd be like, yes, there's some cards on a table. Isn't that exciting? That must be perfect for Vegas.
That's how it felt. It felt like, what's a good card? An ace. Well, let's put two of them on there. We'll see what happens there. Like,
maybe F1 is getting into card games and they're revealing a new game at Vegas.
Can you split aces in blackjack? Can you split aces in blackjack? Yes, you can split aces. Okay.
And is it a good thing?
I would assume so. Because then you get two chances to get 21.
Okay. I know nothing about blackjack.
Which is the goal of the game.
I know nothing about it.
Okay. Well, you need to get to 21. Face cards are worth 10. Aces are either 1 or 11. And then number cards are worth their number.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you pull a card. And so if you pull the Joker.
So, Jokers aren't in there.
Okay. So you pull a king and you get 10 points. And then you pull another king and you get 10 points. And then you pull an ace and then you're just laughing all the way to the bank.
Sure. That's close enough. Basic strategy is dealer's always going to hit it. So you can hit or stay. If you hit, you get another card, and you can hit until you bust. Because if you go over, you bust. But if you get doubles, you're allowed to like split them at the start. So if you have like two nines, you can split nines, and then you might have a shot at getting two 19s, which is good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This is why I don't gamble.
Yeah, you should just go watch the movie 21.
I think I've seen that.
It's a good one.
Okay.
Or read the book Bringing Down the House about the MIT blackjack team. It was very good.
Which the movie was about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The movie's based on the book.
Okay.